today we're finally doing April's trees because I realized last night that I don't have them done and tomorrow's April 1st. So we are going to do trees and we're just gonna have fun with it. If you've got questions, feel free to ask them and leave them in the chat. But for now, we're just gonna, have fun, do some painting. First up though, we've got to sort of organize this and turn this chaos into something usable. So I have marches out just so I know the color order. And I have an empty pan because one of our colors is in this palette. But feel free to ask questions in the chat or just hang out and talk. So this starts with pink always. This is our palest pink. That's purple, that's purple, that's purple. That's blue. Oh, all these greens. Shire. Is that a green? Oh, that's a green. Then those two. Right. It's a brown. Lightning is like a teal. That's a purple. Normally I do this organization way early. Oh, these are both oranges. Well, I guess this is sliding down. All right. I might have Amazonite and Viridian in the wrong order, but honestly, I don't really care. Oh, these are all browns. Hello, welcome. These are all browns. These all go up early in this. Fine, sure, be like that. All right. This is a gray brown. These are all red browns. Okay, we're gonna end with the 3 grays. Well, yes, because if you don't have dirt, you can't grow anything, and most watercolors are made from different types of dirt or minerals. And this is going to be where this one goes. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Fantastic. Last month I screwed up counting. This month though, we are good. So let's wet these all. And then I will set up and film the rest of this month's tiny trees. It feels so late to be doing them. Normally by this point they're filmed and edited and scheduled, and it's been a busy month and they just slipped and didn't happen. So it's, you know, the 31st and I'm just now getting around to it. But it will be fine. I will get them done. All right. These all need to soak. Let's not knock paintbrushes off the table. Let's set this up with my other phone. You guys are on the old iPhone today, which is why the quality is not super great for the stream, but I need the good iPhone for filming the shorts. So, unfortunately, you guys are stuck with the old phone. All right. Which tree brush do I want? Oops. And I dropped one. Currently, I've got 3 detail brushes, which seems like an absurd number to have, but they were on sale at Desairs. So I picked up 2 instead of my normal buying 1 at a time. I want this one. The interesting thing is they're all the same brush, and over the course of painting these, I'm probably going to switch brushes. But to start with, I want to start with this one. Hello, Wendy. I'm finally painting April's tiny trees. No, it's not like they go up tomorrow or anything. I find that doing them live when I've done them, when I've waited until last minute to do them, makes it slightly easier and slightly less time consuming. I get distracted less. If I was doing them not live, it would probably take me like 4 or 5 hours to do all of them. I think last time I did them live, I got them done in like 2.5. So we'll see how long it takes me today to do all of them. Because really, each tree doesn't take all that long to paint. I did start designing new business cards today, and they may or may not have tiny trees on them. I'm very excited. I felt like it was time for a business card redesign. It just feels right to have tiny trees on them. Wonder if I can give you a slightly better angle. I really can't. slightly better. Maybe. Thing is, if I flip you around to the other side, then you're upside down. So you just have to deal with the weird angle today. It's also like a month today that we leave for the Chicago Pen Show, which is very exciting. Oh, the finial on this brush is already wet. I will say that's the most annoying thing about these really tiny brushes is that they don't, the finials are so small that just water pools everywhere. And so right now I have water on my hand. There we go. I do love tiny trees. Right. Scoot all of these over. I'm going to dump the brushes I'm not using. Purely because I'm probably going to need them later, but for now I need the space. Right. Water. Cadmium red. So I've done them with inks before. I think May last year I did a set with inks. These ones I'm doing with watercolor. I'm slowly working through my entire studio palette, which has something like, just my matte one has, I think when I put it into a spreadsheet last year, I could do a different paint every day for 700 days. Purely because I've worked with so many paint brands over the years, and so my studio palette is absolutely massive. So right now I'm doing them with paints, but I have done them with inks before. The one thing I like about doing them with paints is that you tend to be able to get more delicate lines than I can with inks. When you do them with inks, you tend not to be able to get as crisp lines. So I'm back to doing them with paints for now. I don't know. Every May I think about going back to doing them with inks. And every time 30 inks 30 days comes around, I think about doing them with inks again. But really, I don't have to. I've got so many paints. And it's a sort of less enjoyable experience with ink. It's harder to make these really thin lines. So for now, I'm quite happy doing them with paints. And I think I'm like a third of the way through my studio palette at this point, because I did 2 months of shimmer colors just to break it up this year. Hello, welcome. And the list doesn't account for anything new that I've added. Personally, I love painting. I love the science behind pigments. I really, other than this painting project, I haven't filmed any of my recent painting projects. I need to find a new painting challenge because there hasn't been a paint your style in a while. And so I am painting tiny trees. It is a series that I do on shorts every month. And I've done it now for over a year. And so they are these really cool little paintings, and every single one of them uses a different watercolor from my palette. And it's super fun because you get to see paints from a variety of brands and from a whole bunch of different small shops. And maybe there was something you wanted to see, but you've only ever seen it in like normal swatches. And now you can see something like this where you've got a whole bunch of color gradient and stuff. So I love doing them like this. So back to Wendy. Nothing I've been painting I've been filming lately, which isn't great as somebody who works for paint brands or works with paint brands, but I no longer have paint your style. And that was always one of my favorite challenges. So I might go back and do a couple more paint your style repaints. Sorry. It's warmed up here again. And so my allergies are brutal. All right. Color number 4. Thank you. I like doing them. Which is good because I've now painted, I think in the January video I figured that I'd painted about 1,400 and something trees just for this project. So that didn't account for any of the Christmas card trees. And there were hundreds of Christmas card trees this year. So I've been painting for 5 years now, I think so. I got into it from a traumatic brain injury. So yeah, it's 5 years since I first purchased handmade paints. So I was already painting, I guess, the fall of 2019. But this channel started in 2023. I'm as okay as I think anyone is after having stage 4 cancer in their teens. Which is to say, life is still hard at times, but I survived, and lots of people don't. All right, next color. This is not centered. I know it's not centered for you guys, but I'm trying to center it to make my life easier in post when I edit the shorts. But it's far more fun to paint these, not sitting by myself in the basement, especially on a gloomy, rainy day. I like that we went from snow to rain. We went from snow to ice to rain. Being very careful not to skip any colors because I screwed up so badly last month and then had to add 4 colors at the end very carefully to the color gradient that we already had without, repainting them all. But I had to find 4 colors that fit at that end section, and so I'm being very careful this month to not screw that up. There you go. Let's do that. I love how the colors spread in water because depending on the pigment, everything spreads so differently, and sometimes different pigments, or sometimes the same pigment will spread differently depending on what the binder is. So in this case, I think both of these are PB. Oh no, one of these is PR 101. And one of these is P. One of these is PBR 7, and one of these is PR 101. I like purples, but I'm picky about my purples. I like lavendery purples. I'm not a huge fan of dark purples. I'm very picky about my dark purples. I find that lots of times they lean too blue. So I prefer more red leaning dark purple to a more blue leaning dark purple. Oh, we're heading into oranges now. It's an interesting color balance this month. Other than greens, you sort of got like 2 of each color this month, which is fun. So we now have Schminke Tender Orange, I believe. So I started painting these in March of 2024, but I started working through my palette with a random number generator in April of 2024. So I think we're approaching like day 300. Because in January and February this year, I switched and used a different color palette just for a bit of a switch up. I wanted to use some of my special effects watercolors because I think we only see them as accent colors a lot of the time, but they can look super cool by themselves. And there's also a lot of them that like don't really get talked about in the handmade watercolor world or even in the big like larger brands watercolor world, and so I wanted to talk about them. Oh, my phone fell. My tripod and I are having a disagreement today. guess you're going like that, and I will then drop you down a little bit. There. Cool. So that's how we're gonna do this. Oh, I forgot to turn off the camera. Fun. Whatever. So, I really like watercolor. I adore painting. My favorite, though, like non-messy, I've only got a little bit of time to sit down and be creative, are Faber-Castell Pitt pens. Because they are India ink markers. They come in a bunch of different finishes. You can get them in chisel tips, you can get them in brush tips, you can get them in various different bullet nibs. I have mine in mostly brush nibs, and I adore them. I think they're really underrated in the art supply world. But I love them because unlike Tombow pens, they've got a fairly similar brush tip. What you're creating is archival. Most of the Faber-Castell pens are certified for 100 years under sunlight. And for me, that's great because I'm frequently not creating anything that's stored in sunlight. But on occasion, I do a doodle that, you know, gets stuck somewhere. And currently I'm in the process of recreating a piece that I did in Tombow pens back in 2020 because it's faded terribly. But my grandmother loves it and put it in her living room in the sun. And so it's faded really badly in some really interesting ways. And so based on the pictures of it that I have up on Instagram from 2020, I'm trying to recreate it. But this time I'm using archival markers. And I also just like that, like, there's no prep to use them. You can just use them. The only sort of fussy thing about them is they have to be stored horizontally. And so they just live in a mug on my desk sideways, which for me isn't the end of the world. And for me, they're worth that little extra bit of drama to have a really nice archival marker. And I've had some of them now for going on 5 or 6 years. And they're still, because I store them horizontally, they still work fine. They're great. I think the only one I've replaced is my black one because I ran it dry. So they're by far my favorite. If I don't have enough time to pull out watercolors, they are by far my favorite art supply. I will say they're expensive. They are not as expensive as something like an alcohol marker, but they are not inexpensive. And so I would say, like, buy a couple, and then seeing how you feel about it is always a good way to go if you want to try a new art supply. I have done a bit of digital work. I've done digital design. I always come back to pen and paper or paintbrush and paper. Like, even for designing something that I'm going to have to move digital, like my business card design, I'm always going to do that initial sketch on paper. I like the feeling of sitting down to sketch something out pen and paper. I haven't done digital stuff in a while though, other than business card design, because I just enjoy pen and paper more. Let's re-wet. Some of these absorb a lot of water. I enjoyed art, but I failed visual art in high school, which is always a really funny story because I did not pass visual art. I got a 49%, which I always find really funny because it meant that like there was nothing that she felt like I had completed that semester that made me deserve an extra percent to pass the class. And now what I do is make videos on art on the internet and work with fine art brands, which is proof that like what you enjoyed doing isn't always yeah. But I did like other forms of art. I was I would say I liked music and musical theater and all that fun stuff, and dance. Hello. Well, honestly, I will take eBay ads. eBay seems to pay well for their ads. And the Chicago Pen Show fund is not as robust as I wish it was. I think I both find it relaxing and I enjoy that I get to do something I genuinely like as my job. Lots of people don't get to do stuff they enjoy as their job, and I do. So I think that's always a plus. Yes, I'm sort of right now it really just means one less nip grind in Chicago. It means instead of getting 2 things done by Kirk, I'm getting 1 thing done by Kirk, which isn't the end of the world, but I still wish I was going to be able to get 2 things done, but there will be other shows. I've done many in my life. Yeah, so I think I'm getting, or I'm actually, I know I'm getting a fine architect because that is the whole reason I booked my appointment. I desperately want one. I was hoping I was going to be able to get a mini stub on another pen because currently that's my favorite grind. Doesn't look like it's going to happen this time around, but I can be patient and wait. I just love Kirk's mini stubs. I know people love the Imperial. I've tried it at shows before, and I've never fallen in love with it. And I keep hoping that someday I will, fall in love with it. But for now, mini stub and the Architect all the way. And that fine Architect, just, I adore it. And I know I'm getting the fine Architect on a Yovo 6 so that it can go in any of my SDs and stuff. And my Rob's Penworks and any of the custom stuff that I get, because whenever I get custom pens, I always ask for it to be a Yovo. But you did tell me you scored some of Kirk's Flex nibs. And I was a bit jealous. At the same time, though, like, I don't know. I've got vintage Flex from Waterman. Unhappy with how this tree branch is sitting. I'm glad to know you like the fine Architect. I have been hearing a lot about it. I've seen it a bunch of places. I've got friends that have sent me writing samples of the fine Architect and the extra fine Architect. And I'm definitely leaning towards a fine Architect, mostly because I don't love an extra fine to begin with. But I do enjoy a Yovo fine. So I'm leaning towards that. I was just really hoping that I was going to be able to get a mini stub on something else as well. But there will be other shows. And I can wait for other shows. I can be sort of patient. Maybe. Yes, you are picky about your Flex. So I have, where do I have a Schmidt Flex in my card? Maybe from Jaffa. It looks amazingly cool. I think Jaffa recently started offering it individually in their nib section. And I currently have one in my cart over there. You do, because honestly, I know enough about other nibs to get by. I don't know enough about different types of Flex. Because also, the first Flex I ever had in my hand was a vintage Waterman Gold Flex nib. Like, I was spoiled out of the boat, or out of the gate, and, like, after that, like, nothing I've had in my hand has been, I'm like, I have better at home. Why would I get you? is sort of my opinion when it comes to modern flecks. It's like, I have vintage gold flecks at home. Why would I pick you up? That being said, I do want to try a, oh, what are they called? Mag 650? Is that what they are? The one that Tom Odo and Vanessa had a flex off with months ago. Those look crazy. I do want to try one of those. Yeah, the thing is, like, it was already in our house. It was my great grandfather's, and I was just handed to it. Yeah, so like I had none of the anxiety around vintage then that other people in the pen world have, because I didn't know what I was handed. All I knew was what Marina told me, which was go to Mont Blanc, get a color of ink you like, and then only ink it with that ink. And that's what I've done with this pen. And it's been great. Oh, good to know. See, I haven't had one in my hand. I need one. I feel like I need one in my hand to just like get a feel for it. They're one of those like weird. Because honestly, I don't think I'd enjoy writing with one. I think I'd get bored of having it flexed, but I must try. Yeah, I was hoping he was going to come to Chicago, but I didn't see him on the list of vendors. What's up with this paint? Why are you so chunky? Is your binder just reactivating weird? This was my problem with the Schmincke Super Granulating series. Like, they were so expensive and so many of them misbehaved. Like, it was just... It was absurd how many misbehaved for how expensive they were. And how similar some of the colors were. I will also note, it's been a year and a half since the last color set. The last color set was in the spring of 2023. So I also wonder if we've seen the last of the sets. There was talk last year that a new one was coming, but I don't think it is. There was talk after Germany last year we were getting a new set, but I don't think we're going to. Maybe we would have seen it on the market by now. What's going on in the chat? I like that analogy, Wendy. Ooh. All right. This is the old Viridian from, what's it called? Winsor Newton. This is no longer their Viridian because they discontinued the Pigment last year, I want to say. All of a sudden they pulled it from all their colors. I And I feel conflicted about that because if you're a watercolor purist and you're trying to do crazy mixes, you need the pure pigment. Replacing it with a bunch of pigments that sort of mimic it does nothing. And also adding a whole bunch of stuff to it to make it cheaper doesn't help if somebody's trying to mix their own colors. But the price of Viridian did skyrocket last year, and so I do sort of understand why they made the decision they did. I just wish that artists had been given more of a heads up that it was being discontinued, because I definitely know friends that would have stocked up. I was lucky in the fact that when I went to my store, I saw them on clearance before the discontinuation had been announced, and I snagged a tube for my collection. But I know lots of people that were upset by it. It's a very pretty green. It's a very poppy in your face green. And it's used in a lot of granulating mixes. So if you are somebody that creates your own granulating mixes, you're sort of out of luck, because Daniel Smith's is nowhere near as nice to work with as the Winsor Newton one was. All right. We have another green. This is a slightly more green, if that makes any sense. We are at minute 47 and on tree 15. Making good time today. Will I actually edit them tonight? Probably not. But I'll edit some of them tonight. So this is Amazonite Genuine by Daniel Smith. I can't remember why I added this to my palette. It might have been in my buying Daniel Smith tubes from clearance phase. That was a good phase. Might have been my favorite phase of Michael's during 2020 and 2021. There we go. All right, sip of tea. All right, thanks for the hangout, Wendy. Hope you have a good rest of your day. All right, last one for this row is one of my favorite versions of Green Earth. I have like 8 versions of this pigment in my palette, because depending on where it's harvested and how it's processed, it's a different color, and it can range from a green to a brown to sort of like a tealy color. I love PG23. It was one of my sort of very first like explaining about this pigment videos, I believe. And it is still, if somebody asks me what my favorite pigment is, it's either this or it's Potter's Pink. But I think we're back to it being this, because I love all the tonal variation that you just don't see in a bunch of colors. You do see it a bit in PBR7, which I've got like 8 versions of in my palette. But in this, you like, it can be this color, it can be a green gray, it can be so many things, and it's just so pretty. And I love things that change based on how they're harvested and where they're processed. Green earth is one of those things that you can tell where it's really sort of easy to tell where it was harvested based on the color, which you can do with some pigments. Like Italian raw sienna tends to be more, I think it's more yellow than any other raw sienna, I believe. Just love this color. So there we go. This color. It's so like a pale green right now. And yet I've got some in my palette that range from green to brown. It's also one of those pigments that really bugs me when a brand has a color called green earth and it's a mix, because pigment wise it is one of the cheapest pigments out there. And sometimes the pigments brands use in a mix are more expensive. It is also the pigment that gives old paintings their greenish hue, because it was used as the underpainting. And the other colors have all faded away over time, but the green earth, because it's light fast, has stayed put, which is super cool in my mind. All right, let's take those over there. All right, water on the brush. We are doing the Holbein version of green earth, which has like 4 pigments on it. And it's much more green. All right. Oh, almost done greens. About to move on to teals. All right. Straight-ish. Right. We are sort of close to being done. My cup of tea is cold. But I don't want to go upstairs and get a warm cup of tea. Do though want to change my album that I'm listening to because now it's looped like 3 times and I'm tired of listening to it. So let's change what I'm listening to. And then we'll keep painting trees. Well, that's not what I want to listen to. What I want to listen to. Oh, it's not saved to my laptop. Never mind. We will just go back to looping the same album. Ugh. Alright, 1 second. deal with that work email later. Why is it showing up on my phone but not showing up? So I did have an electric kettle downstairs. And I no longer have an electric kettle downstairs, which is just stupid. Our electric kettle moved upstairs so that we had the ability to boil water faster in the kitchen, which is all fine and dandy, except it means that now I don't have a kettle in the basement. And that is not okay. All right, there. I airdropped the album from my phone to my laptop. Because for whatever reason, it wasn't showing up on my laptop. And clearly I can't listen to music on my phone. We are back to musicals shuffled, but or we're back to shuffling a whole bunch of random things, but instead of musicals, we are shuffling movie soundtracks. And for whatever reason, the playlist was not on my phone, my laptop, it was on my phone, and I should have been on both. For whatever reason, my iTunes account hasn't been syncing lately. I just been listening to the same album for like a week and a half now, and which is honestly isn't uncommon for me with the brain injury. I'll get like really into something for about a week, and then I won't listen to it again for like a year and a half. And these are not Marina's watercolors. The funny thing is, Marina and I have now been friends for 4 and a bit years, I think. I don't own a single one of Marina's paints, which sort of makes me feel like a terrible friend. But Marina started making paints when I was on a break from painting and buying paints. And then when I came back to buying paints, she was not making paints. And now she is like sort of making paints again, and I'm like sort of painting but not really painting much these days. And I'm also trying to cull my palette, which is the same thing she's doing. And so I don't own any of Marina's stuff, which we both find really funny, because I own paints from everyone pretty much in the handmade watercolor world, except hers. I think part of it was for a long time I was only buying paints that were standard size pans that fit in my studio palette. And Marina makes all of her pans, and so they wouldn't have fit in my palette. And I had a real issue with that for a while because I liked having everything together. Now I care a bit less. I've got a lot of little random palettes, but for a long time, everything had to fit together nicely. And then I started to buy things like beam paints. I would say the Chicago Nib Fund is more important. I would like a Kirkspire mini stub on something other than a Yovo. Honestly, like the reality is I could pause this stream, I could go upstairs, I could boil the kettle, I could text somebody upstairs and ask them to put on the kettle. I'm choosing not to do any of that and instead am drinking a cold cup of tea. Because, you know, that's what a logical person does when it's rainy and gross outside. Why isn't this tree working? I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it, but the brushes on this paintbrush have like started to curl over, which is so annoying. Yes, the nib fund is needed. I will say though, thanks to people that used my Alice affiliate credit, I was able to mostly cover a Galen Leather Expansi Folio on affiliate credit when they restock them, which I very much appreciate, because I've wanted one I've wanted a folio from Galen for a while, and when they released the Expanse, I knew I really wanted one of those. And so I was saving up my affiliate credit for one. And so I really appreciate anyone who uses my code at Atlas or Esterbrook or my Gold Spot link. All of those lovely things do make a difference in purchases both for this channel, like paper, or in other fun things that you guys will get to see videos on, like the folio when it comes home in a few weeks. This paint is just, it probably needed more water and to be worked a little bit before I actually tried painting with it, but I don't have that sort of patience today. All right, there we go. Ooh. I'm trying to be very good and not order anything that I don't have affiliate credit for, so that I actually, have money to spend at Chicago, which is really hard because there are so many pretty things coming out lately. But I'm trying. And I'm okay with, like the Galen thing, I'm okay with topping it up if I don't quite have enough affiliate credit for it, mostly because Atlas said they probably didn't think they were getting another Galen restock before the Chicago Pen Show. And so if I wanted one, this was my chance to get one. And so I got it, and I topped it up with a little bit of, I refer to it as real money versus affiliate credit. Thank you. I appreciate it. But for now, I'm trying not to buy anything that I don't have affiliate credit for. So there are some pretty things that I'm not buying so that I have nib money for Chicago. I'm also waiting on Colorverse to announce what the show ink is going to be, because they've teased that they're doing the show ink, or Bryce teased that they were doing the show ink when he was on Desk Chatter, but we still haven't seen a preview this week of, we still have yet to see a preview of the ink. And that seems like, I don't know, it felt like we saw it quite early last year. So I'm like, I don't know. So I'm looking forward to finally seeing it when it comes out. because as much as I like Androlium inks, I don't like Androlium ink bottles. I find them awkward to open. So I'm interested to see what Colorverse does with a Chicago ink. I do think Androlium, though, has been very on point with their themes for the Chicago Pen Show inks for the past couple years. I think they've done them in the past, I want to say 3 or 4 years. It's all been Androlium inks. But I believe Androlium also runs the Miami Pen Show. It's either Miami or Orlando they run. And both have moved, I think both have moved venues this year. Or one moved venues last year and one moved venues this year. Oh, yes, Marina's Ophelia is lovely. I really like her Ophelia. I also really like a couple of the pens that Luke showed in his 20 questions and that David showed in his 20 questions today. That episode went up a couple hours ago. There are some really fun pens in both episodes. And Luke's were all pretty much from Handmade Makers, and David's were all vintage and old and beautifully stunning. And a reminder that, you know, as much as I do really like some of the handmade pens on the market, I am a huge fan of some of the old silver pens. They're just stunningly beautiful. All right. Another tree. It always, when we get to this point, feels so hard to finish them. Like once we hit this point, I've only got a couple left, and I'm always done at this point. I don't want to keep doing trees. This is why I don't do them the day before they have to go up normally. But March has been busy. I also did finally film the gardening video, so it will be coming later this month. For those of you that have been patiently waiting for that video, I did finally film it. And it will be coming. It will actually probably come out closer to the end of the month. Just because it's going to take a little bit to edit it. But it was super fun to put together. It is also long. I will give you that warning. It is long. I think we're approaching like 50 minutes on that video. And I don't know how much of that is going to be like stuff that gets culled out because some of it's like information. Yeah. Probably. Colorverse also like sometimes limits the number of bottles of a show ink they do, which Androlium doesn't really to the same extent. Like Atlas normally takes home the stock of Androlium inks, and then they're for sale on Atlas until they're sold out. But they are, I don't know, I like last year's, and it was just a blue black, but it was a really pretty blue black. And that's the thing, I don't think it has to be a really fancy show ink. I think it just has to be a pretty color. Yeah, I think the only pen that I'm actually really worried about the stack breaking is my vintage celluloid Waterman, purely because it would be so hard to replace the sack in that pen. For the most part, though, all my other vintage are Parkers, and you can buy replacement parts for Parkers really easily. To the extent that, like, I am considering having, like, just picking up some of the replacement parts just so that I have them on hand. They're easier to find in other countries than they are to find in Canada. And so I am thinking about picking up a couple pieces when we're in the States, just because there are so many vintage Parker dealers at the Chicago Pen Show who deal both in Parkers and in parts. And I never want to be in a position where I need parts and I can't get them locally and I don't have access to them. So I might try and snag a couple things while we're in the States for the Chicago Pen Show, just so that I've got them on hand. Oh, 7 left. Honestly, by the time we get to this point, I just want to be done. And it's a short month. There are only 30 days this month. I'm only doing 30 days. I'm not doing 31. We're on day 24. We're almost done. And I am very much done. It's interesting how different pigments behave differently. So this is a cobalt. It's really not behaving the way I want it to, like line-wise. Cobalts, I find, tend to be a bit more clumpy. Which is fine. But I'm just not getting those nice, like, little thin, wispy branches that I really like. All right. It is totally okay. Enjoy your chat. I'm, you know, just complaining about the, what is that, 6 times 3? 18 trees that I have to paint left. Because after all of these trees, the last 18, so the last like 21. 24 to 21 are always the hardest because I am sort of done. And we've hit that point well and truly where I'm just done. And my leg's asleep because I'm sitting on it. But there's no good way to sit at this table for hours and paint other than sitting cross-legged. So I have to just deal with the fact that my foot falls asleep. All right, there we go. I love Mont Blanc Midnight Blue. It's one of my favorite blue inks. Yes, that is true. And that is one of the reasons I like doing things with ink. And it's pigment dependent. Some pigments are going to be totally smooth. They're not going to have any weird clumping issues. And then some, just because of not, like, normally I mix with water on a palette before I paint. But because these are so tiny and don't, at the end of the day, don't really matter, I'm not. The most I'm sort of doing is mixing on the top of a pan. So some of them are just a little bit more high maintenance than others. It also doesn't help that this paintbrush is starting to die, which is one of the things that I really dislike about detail brushes. Like, even the high quality ones probably only last like 2 months of tiny trees. And so instead I buy the cheap ones, and even the cheap ones now are $5 to $6 a brush. But they might last 2.5 months of tiny trees before their tips start to like curl up and go weird. And I just find that so annoying because I'm just buying these tiny detail brushes all the time. Yes, I find repetition mind-numbingly boring. So there's a period in, I think probably November, December this year, that I went, tiny trees are disappearing. I'm so tired of doing tiny trees. And the reality is, A, I love them. Like, I love how they look. And B, people who are buying paints often find them because they're single pigment colors or single paint color swatches. And because they've got the name of the paint, when you search that paint on Google, they sometimes come up. And so I've kept doing them, but doing them live is definitely helpful because I've painted now thousands of trees for this series. And it does get really repetitive. So I'm glad that we are now 4 away from being done. And then, I don't even know what time it is anymore. Oh, it's after 5 o'clock. Where did today go? At least I did other stuff. I filmed other stuff today. All right. Here's our let's not screw this up. We've made it to the weird pan. As I drip water on me. All right. They really do get a workout, and they're not, because really with detail brushes there isn't a big difference in the high quality ones versus the cheaper ones. I just cannot justify paying $20+ for a brush that I know from experience doesn't last very long. So for now, we stick to the cheap detail brushes and then complain when they don't last very long. I am not going to comment on that purely because it's not my place to criticize anybody else's form of art, especially if they enjoy creating it. And it doesn't matter if something's overrated or not. What I might find overrated, other people might really enjoy creating. It would really help if I actually got my paintbrush in the water cup. Let's act like we have a brain. I see your very long comment, and I will read it once I've painted these trees. It's always really nice when we get to this point and I get to look down and realize that I've done the math on the number of colors I needed correctly. It's always, and last month I screwed it up badly. We got to this row and I had 2 colors left, or 3 colors left, and I needed 7. And so I don't always do it correctly. And this month, I got it right. And I have the right number of colors. And there's always a certain amount of joy in that, purely because it's always sort of a mad scramble to add colors in at the end because they've got to fit perfectly with what you've already got on the page so that people don't realize that you screwed up at some point. I'm glad. Honestly, I like all the different videos I produce. I really like these sit down chatty videos where I'm working on something and there's a discussion going on. I do want to get back to the watercolor pigment videos, and I haven't quite figured out how to do that. We might get back to them in the fall, but I did really enjoy getting to do them, and they still get some traction. And so they were really fun to do over the years. Really, I need somebody to come out with another super granulating set that I can dupe. I guess Holbein has just come out with one, but it's hard to get your hands on, and so I haven't even tried to get my hands on it. It's also quite expensive. And so for now, I'm sticking to the super granulating colors I have. I might try and get a dot card of it from a friend who has the set, but I think I don't think I'll own the set, unlike a lot of the other super granulating sets. Also, I've seen the colors and I'm not that into them, which surprises me because I do really like the Holbein paints. There's just something about the set that I'm not a huge fan of. And I think it's because I'm really tired of blue and green super granulating colors that sort of all look the same, regardless of the brand that does them. There are lots of really innovative ways to create blue and green super granulating mixes, and no one's really doing that right now. Everyone's sort of putting out the same 3 or 4 pigment mixes as their super granulating blue and green colors, and they all look pretty much the same, and I'm sort of bored with it. So I don't see the point in buying a very expensive paint set that I know I'm not going to enjoy purely because people might watch the video. Like, I duped the entire Schmincke Super Granulating collection. And that was a lot of work. I think I started planning that video back in June, and it didn't come out until, the first episode didn't come out, I don't think, until like October. That series was so much work. And not really worth it in the end. It didn't perform very well. But I had a lot of fun and learned a lot doing it. So I guess it was worth it. But I always enjoy the Pigment videos. They're always fun. We have one color left. And I'm not going to do a tape pull today, mostly because I don't think the page is going to be fully dry. And so I don't want to risk making a hole. Oh, this is very sticky. Can we be less sticky? There. All right. The final one. Sometimes I go, oh, I'm tired of trees. And then I go, yeah, because you just painted 90 of them in an hour and 40-ish minutes. I guess an hour and a half because I spent the first 10 minutes organizing colors. Well, this might be our fastest tree painting session yet. Normally it takes a lot longer. But still, 90 trees from beginning to end. It is very fitting that my new business cards will have trees on them, I think. Just based on the number of trees that I paint day to day. All right, there we go. Two brushes, 30 colors, 90 trees. So now I get to figure out what all of the paints were this month and make sure the list is organized. And then we'll be off to the races. And then I have to edit all of these. That's less fun. But for now, I'm going to end this here. And thanks so much for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Check out these videos on the Shorts feed because that's where they live. And I hope you enjoyed.